The sun was just beginning to set over the horizon, casting a golden hue across the dense jungle. The air was thick with humidity, the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves filling the atmosphere. Evelyn's boots sank into the damp ground as she navigated through the thick underbrush, her every movement calculated and precise. She could feel the weight of the journey in her bones, but she pressed on. The deeper into the jungle she went, the closer she came to unlocking the greatest secret the world had ever known. She had spent years tracking the legends, piecing together the scattered clues hidden in ancient texts, forgotten myths, and hidden archives. The truth of what lay ahead had always been elusive, until now. The ancients had long disappeared from history, their power and knowledge lost to the sands of time. But Evelyn believed they were not just myths. They were real, and the key to unlocking humanity's forgotten potential was hidden in their ancient ruins, buried deep in the heart of the jungle. The group she was leading through the jungle was small, but it was the best she could assemble. Lucas, a seasoned archaeologist with an expertise in ancient civilizations, was by her side. His skepticism had been evident from the start, but she had earned his trust with her relentless pursuit of the truth. Along with him were two experienced local guides, trained in navigating the treacherous terrain. "I still don't understand why we're here," Lucas muttered as they trudged forward, his voice barely rising above the rustling of the trees. "There's nothing but jungle around us. The ruins you've been talking about, they're just stories. Evelyn, you've seen the maps, the legends. This could be nothing more than a wild goose chase." Evelyn didn't respond immediately. She knew the skepticism all too well. It wasn't the first time she had encountered doubt in her pursuit of the unknown, but the vision of what lay ahead, the feeling in her gut that something far more powerful was waiting just beyond the horizon, kept her moving forward. "You can call it whatever you want, Lucas," she finally said, her voice steady and firm. "But the legends, the myths, they all point to the same thing, a power beyond our comprehension, buried in these ruins. We're standing on the threshold of rediscovering what humanity lost." Lucas let out a frustrated sigh, but said nothing more. He had learned not to question Evelyn's resolve, even when her beliefs seemed far-fetched. After all, she had led them to places others could only dream of, uncharted territories, ancient structures hidden beneath layers of earth. This wasn't a typical excavation. It was something bigger, something that could change the world. Hours passed, the jungle thickening around them. The path had become nearly impossible to follow, and their progress slowed to a crawl. The weight of the heat was oppressive, each breath a struggle as the humidity clung to their skin. But Evelyn's determination never wavered. She knew they were close. Just as the last remnants of daylight began to fade, the team arrived at a clearing. The air shifted, cooler now, as if the jungle itself was holding its breath. And there it was, a massive stone structure half obscured by vines and moss, ancient and crumbling, but undeniably impressive. The ruins towered above them, its once great walls now mere shadows of their former selves, covered in centuries of growth. Yet, despite the ravages of time, the energy that radiated from the site was unmistakable. "This is it," Evelyn whispered, her voice filled with awe. Her heart raced as she took a step closer. The legends were true. They had found it, the lost city of the ancients. Lucas stared at the ruins, his face pale as he took in the sheer scale of the structure. I don't believe it," he muttered, his skepticism beginning to crack. "How is this even possible?" "We don't have time to question it," Evelyn said, her gaze scanning the site. "The power here isn't just buried in the walls or the artifacts. It's embedded in the very stones. If we can unlock it, we'll understand what the ancients knew, what they discovered. The secrets of their civilization are within our reach." As they moved closer to the entrance, Evelyn noticed something strange. The stone was covered in intricate carvings, symbols that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light of their torches. It was a language she had never seen before, but the patterns felt familiar, as if they were calling to her. "These markings," Lucas said, stepping forward with a mix of awe and caution, "they're not like anything I've encountered. The style is completely foreign." Evelyn reached out, tracing the symbols with her fingers. The stone felt warm, almost alive. She didn't know how she knew, but something inside her whispered that these carvings held the key. The power of the ancients was hidden here, encoded in the very structure of the city. "There's more here than just a city," Evelyn said, her voice hushed, reverent. "It's a map, a guide to unlocking their power." They worked quickly, the light of their torches casting long shadows as they deciphered the markings. Hours passed, but Evelyn could feel the pulse of the site growing stronger. Her fingers danced across the stone, following the patterns that seemed to shift under her touch, revealing new symbols, new instructions. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Evelyn's hand landed on a specific symbol. It was a simple shape, but it felt significant. The stone beneath it hummed, and for a moment, everything went still. The air grew heavy, and Evelyn could hear the faintest whisper in the back of her mind, a voice calling to her from the depths of time. Then, with a soft rumble, the stone shifted. The entrance to the ruins opened. A dark passageway stretched out before them, leading deep into the heart of the lost city. The air was cool, and the faintest scent of ancient dust filled their lungs. It was the beginning of something monumental, something that would change everything they thought they knew about humanity's past and its future. Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. They had come this far. The truth was within reach. "Let's go," she said, her voice resolute. "We're not just uncovering the past. We're rediscovering the future." With that, they stepped into the darkness, the secrets of the ancients waiting for them. The air inside the dark passageway was stale and heavy, as if it had not been disturbed for centuries. Evelyn led the way, her torch casting long, flickering shadows across the smooth stone walls. Lucas followed closely behind, his expression a mix of wonder and apprehension. The further they ventured into the depths, the more the weight of their discoveries seemed to press down on them. The passage was narrow, barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side. The walls were covered in ancient carvings, some familiar and others unrecognizable. The deeper they went, the more the symbols seemed to pulse with an ethereal glow, as if the very stones themselves were alive, responding to their presence. "This place is incredible," Lucas whispered, his voice barely audible in the stillness. "It's like nothing I've ever seen before. These markings, they're almost reactive." Evelyn nodded without looking back. She could feel it too. There was an energy in the air, an almost palpable force that seemed to hum through her very bones. She had read about this in the old texts. The ancients had mastered not only technology, but a form of energy that was completely unknown to modern science. This was more than just a city. It was a power source, an ancient engine of untold potential. They continued their journey, the passage twisting and turning, each corner revealing more mystery. After what felt like hours of walking, the narrow tunnel suddenly opened into a massive chamber. The ceiling stretched high above them, disappearing into the shadows, while the floor was lined with strange geometric patterns, glowing faintly in the dim light of their torches. In the center of the room stood a large stone platform, upon which rested a massive, intricately carved artifact. The artifact was shaped like a sphere, but its surface was covered in hundreds of smaller stones, each one glowing with a soft, inner light. The sphere seemed to pulse with an energy that resonated to the chamber, vibrating in the air around them. "This is it," Evelyn breathed, her voice filled with awe. "This is what we've been searching for." Lucas took a step forward, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What is it? What's this thing?" Evelyn approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. She had studied countless ancient texts, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The artifact was like nothing she had ever seen. It was more than just a relic. It was a key to understanding the ancients' true power. "I don't know," she admitted, "but it's connected to everything. It's the heart of their technology, their knowledge. This is what they left behind." The air in the chamber seemed to thicken, and the glowing stones on the sphere began to flicker, as if reacting to their presence. Evelyn could feel the energy rising, an invisible force that surrounded them, as if the chamber itself was alive and watching them. Suddenly, a deep rumble shook the floor beneath them, and the ground seemed to tremble. Evelyn and Lucas instinctively reached out to steady themselves, but the room was alive with energy now, the vibrations growing stronger by the second. A low hum echoed through the chamber, reverberating in their bones. "What's happening?" Lucas asked, his voice tense. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She was too focused on the artifact, watching as the glow of the stones intensified. The hum grew louder, and the sphere began to shift, slowly rotating on its platform. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse in time with the artifact, and the temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Then, in a sudden flash of light, the artifact came to life. The sphere split open with a grinding sound, revealing a network of intricate, glowing pathways inside. From within, a beam of pure, white light shot upwards, illuminating the entire chamber. The walls of the room seemed to dissolve in the light, revealing vast holographic projections of landscapes, strange cities, floating structures, and massive energy sources that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was the knowledge the ancients had left behind. What is this? Lucas gasped, staring at the projections. Is this some kind of map? Evelyn stepped closer to the holograms, her mind racing to process what she was seeing. The projections showed images of technologies far beyond anything the modern world had achieved. Energy fields that could power entire cities, machines capable of manipulating time and space, and weapons of unimaginable power. But there was something more, something hidden within the projections. At the center of it all, she saw a glowing symbol, similar to the one on the entrance of the ruins. It was a symbol she recognized, a pattern of interconnected lines and geometric shapes, almost like a code. The symbol pulsed with an intensity that seemed to call to her. "I think I understand now," she whispered, her mind piecing together the fragments of information. This isn't just a map. It's a blueprint for everything they knew, their power, their technology, their entire civilization. Blueprint, Lucas repeated, confused. For what? Evelyn didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached out, her fingers hovering over the glowing symbol. As she touched it, a sudden rush of information flooded her mind. Images, sensations, and knowledge poured into her consciousness, overwhelming her senses. It was as if the entire history of the ancients was being revealed in an instant. She gasped, her body shaking with the intensity of the experience. The knowledge was both exhilarating and terrifying. The ancients had discovered a power that could reshape the very fabric of reality. But with that power came great responsibility and the potential for great destruction. The knowledge was far more than she had imagined. It wasn't just a way to harness energy. It was a way to control the very forces of nature itself. And it had been buried here in this forgotten city for a reason. "Evelyn," Lucas shouted, his voice breaking through the haze of her mind. "What's happening? What did you see?" Evelyn blinked, struggling to regain control of her thoughts. The visions were still swirling in her mind, but she forced herself to focus. She had to make sense of it, had to understand the true nature of what they had uncovered. The ancients, she began, her voice trembling. They didn't just discover power. They became power. They merged with it, transcended their physical forms. But something went wrong. They tried to control too much. The room seemed to grow darker as the weight of her words settled in. The projections flickered and began to fade, the sphere closing slowly. But the knowledge Evelyn had gained remained imprinted in her mind. "We have to go," she said, her voice urgent. "This place is not just a relic. It's a warning." Before Lucas could respond, the floor beneath them shifted again, and the rumbling started once more. The walls trembled, and a deep, eerie sound filled the air, as if the very structure of the ruins was awakening. Something had changed. Something had been disturbed. The ancients had left their secrets behind, but those secrets were not meant to be uncovered. The true danger was just beginning. The rumbling continued to echo through the ruins, vibrating the very air around them. The walls groaned as though the city itself was waking from a deep slumber. Evelyn's heart raced in her chest, the knowledge she had gained just moments ago swirling in her mind like a storm. It was clear now that what they had uncovered was far more than they could have anticipated. This wasn't just about forgotten power. It was a warning. "We need to move," Evelyn urged, her voice low but urgent. "Something's happening." Lucas was still standing near the now-closed artifact, his eyes wide with disbelief. What did you see?" he asked, his voice shaking. This isn't possible. How can this be real?" Evelyn grabbed his arm, pulling him away from the platform. "Lucas, we don't have time to question it. We need to leave, now." The stone beneath their feet shifted again, and a crack appeared along one of the walls. From it, an eerie green light began to seep, casting an unnatural glow across the chamber. Evelyn could feel a rising sense of dread in her gut. She wasn't sure what was happening, but it was clear that the ruins were not as abandoned as they had thought. The guide, Tomas, motioned toward the tunnel they had come through. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. "We have to get out of here. This place, it's changing." Evelyn didn't need to be told twice. She turned and began sprinting back toward the tunnel, the others following close behind. The stone wall seemed to shift as they ran, the once clear path now an obstacle course of falling debris and shifting architecture. The vibrations in the air grew stronger, more erratic, as though the very foundation of the city was quaking. Behind them, the low hum of the artifact echoed through the halls, resonating in a way that felt alive. Evelyn's breath quickened as the walls seemed to close in around them. She could feel something watching them, something ancient and powerful. Whatever force they had triggered was far from benign. They reached the tunnel, but as they tried to exit, the entrance collapsed with a deafening crash, the stone crumbling and falling into the ground, sealing off their only escape route. "No!" Lucas shouted, slamming his fist into the debris. "We're trapped!" The light from their torches flickered, casting fleeting shadows on the walls. Evelyn's mind raced, but the sense of panic rising within her was hard to suppress. She was the one who had brought them here. She had uncovered the power of the ancients, and now it felt like they were paying the price. "Calm down," Evelyn shouted, her voice cutting through the panic. "There's another way out. We just have to find it." But as she turned to scan the chamber, a faint sound reached her ears, a low, otherworldly growl that seemed to emanate from the depths of the ruins. Her breath caught in her throat. She had read about the dark forces that the ancients had tried to control, but she never imagined they had left something behind. Something more than just technology. "What was that?" Tomas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Evelyn admitted, her eyes narrowing as she strained to listen. The growl came again, this time followed by a scraping noise, like something heavy dragging across stone. "But we need to find a way out, and fast." Just then, the ground beneath them trembled violently, and the green light that had seeped from the walls intensified. From the shadows, a shape began to emerge, large, imposing, and dark. It was a figure, humanoid but unlike anything they had ever seen. It was as if the walls themselves had given birth to a living entity. Its body was made of what appeared to be stone and metal, with glowing symbols carved into its surface. It moved with an unnatural grace, its glowing eyes locked onto the group. Evelyn could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the air thick with the weight of the unknown. "Stay back," Lucas shouted, reaching for the flare gun holstered at his waist. But the creature's eyes flashed and he froze, his body seizing up as if it were being controlled by some unseen force. The creature took a step forward, the ground vibrating beneath its weight. Evelyn instinctively stepped in front of Lucas, trying to shield him, though she knew there was little she could do. The creature was too powerful, and they were too far from safety. "Move," Tomas shouted, his voice breaking as he sprinted for the tunnel. Evelyn hesitated for a moment, her eyes locked on the creature's glowing gaze. She couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't trying to kill them, at least not yet. It was guarding something deeper within the ruins. Without warning, the creature lunged forward, its stone and metal body moving with a speed that defied its size. Tomas was the first to react, diving into a side passage that seemed to lead deeper into the complex. Evelyn grabbed Lucas's arm and pulled him with her, the sound of the creature's footsteps echoing behind them. They ran down the corridor, desperate to escape the creature's pursuit. But the deeper they went, the more the tunnel seemed to twist and stretch. The walls pulsed with energy, and the strange, glowing symbols from before began to appear again. But this time, they were moving, shifting in a way that didn't seem natural. The creature was still following them, its growl growing louder, closer. It wasn't just hunting them. It was herding them, driving them toward something. Finally, They came to a large chamber, its ceiling high and vaulted. In the center of the room stood another pedestal, this one far grander than the first. The light from the pedestal illuminated the entire chamber, and Evelyn could feel the pressure building in her chest. "This is it," she whispered, barely believing her own words. "The heart of the power." The ancients weren't just trying to harness energy. They were trying to create something new. Behind her, the creature's growl turned into a deafening roar as it entered the chamber, its eyes burning with an unholy light. It was too late to turn back. "We have to figure out how to control this," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the fear rising within her. "The ancients didn't just leave a power source. They left us a choice. We can either use this power or we can destroy it." But as she approached the pedestal, she realized there was no choice. The power was already awake, and there was no turning back. The air in the chamber felt charged with an unseen force, pulsing with a rhythm that mirrored the beat of Evelyn's heart. The creature's growl echoed through the walls, shaking the very foundation of the ancient city. Every step it took toward them seemed to reverberate through the stone, the ground beneath their feet trembling with the weight of its presence. Evelyn turned toward the pedestal, her eyes locked on the glowing object at its center. The light emanating from it was unlike anything she had ever seen. Not just illumination, but an energy, a power that seemed to pulse in time with her own breath. The moment she stepped closer, a shock of understanding rushed through her like an electric current. "This is it," she murmured, her voice steady but filled with awe. "This is what they were trying to harness. This is the source." Lucas stepped up beside her, his hand trembling as he reached for the pedestal. "What is this thing? It looks alive." Evelyn reached out to stop him, her hand brushing his arm. "Don't touch it yet. We need to understand what it is first. If we're wrong..." The creature's growl grew louder, cutting her thoughts short. It was closing in on them, its stone-like body shifting with unnatural precision. But Evelyn didn't take her eyes off the pedestal. She couldn't. The knowledge she had uncovered was here, locked within the heart of the ancient power. And now, more than ever, it was clear that this was their only hope of escaping the nightmare they had unleashed. "Evelyn," Lucas said, his voice urgent, "we need to do something. That thing is almost here. What do we do?" "I think..." Evelyn trailed off, her eyes scanning the symbols etched into the pedestal. "I think we can control it. This is not just an artifact. It's a mechanism, a key. The ancients didn't just build this place to store their power. They designed it to be activated, to be used. But we need to understand the code first. If we don't..." Her words hung in the air, the implication clear. If they didn't figure out how to control the power, the creature would not be the only threat they faced. The hum of the pedestal's energy grew louder, and the light intensified, flooding the chamber with a stark, blinding glow. Evelyn's mind raced as she deciphered the ancient symbols on its surface. She had seen these before, but they were only fragments of the knowledge that had been unlocked in her mind when she touched the sphere in the first chamber. Without warning, she placed her hand on the pedestal, aligning her palm with the glowing symbols. A surge of power shot through her, her vision briefly blurring as the information flooded her mind again. It was overwhelming, too much to comprehend at once. But through the haze, one thing became clear. The power of the ancients was tied to their very will. They had created a network of energy, a system that responded to intention. Whoever controlled the pedestal controlled the energy within the city. "Evelyn!" Lucas shouted, his voice panicked. He had been watching her, his eyes wide with fear as she stood frozen, her body trembling with the intensity of the power coursing through her. "What's happening?" I think I can control it," Evelyn gasped, her voice strained. "But I need to focus." The creature's footsteps were now deafening, the sound of its massive metal and stone body scraping against the floor echoing through the chamber. It was getting closer. Desperately, Evelyn focused her thoughts, pushing all distractions out of her mind. She couldn't let fear take hold. The pedestal symbols shifted beneath her hand, the lines twisting and rearranging themselves as the energy began to respond. With each new configuration, Evelyn could feel the power growing stronger, the pulse of the room aligning with her heartbeat. She could feel the city, the very earth beneath her feet, coming alive, A burst of light exploded from the pedestal, engulfing the room in a brilliant white glow. The creature screeched, its eyes glowing brighter than ever, its body recoiling as though in pain. It tried to move forward, but the light forced it back, its massive frame jerking with each step as it was repelled by the power radiating from the pedestal. "What is this?" Tomas cried, his voice full of awe and terror as he backed away from the light. "It's like the entire city is alive." Evelyn's eyes were wide with the realization that what they had activated was more than just energy. It was a force that could manipulate reality itself. It wasn't just a weapon or a source of power. It was a foundation of everything the ancients had created, a bridge between the physical world and the forces that governed it. She forced herself to stay calm, to push through the fear. She could feel the creature's resistance fading, its growls growing weaker as the light from the pedestal continued to push it back. But the creature wasn't gone. It was still there, still lurking in the shadows, waiting. With a final burst of energy, the pedestal's glow reached its peak, filling the entire chamber with blinding light. The creature's form twisted and contorted, its stone body cracking and splintering under the strain. For a moment, Evelyn thought it might be destroyed entirely. But then, the light flickered and dimmed, leaving the creature standing, its body seemingly intact. But it was different now. The creature's movements were sluggish, its once rapid, aggressive stance replaced by an unnatural stillness. It wasn't just resisting the power, it was being subdued by it, its autonomy taken away. "We've done it," Evelyn whispered, breathless, her hand still resting on the pedestal. We've controlled it." The creature's eyes flickered, its gaze now dull and devoid of the malevolent energy it had once held. For a moment, everything was still. The chamber was quiet, the energy from the pedestal now pulsating with a rhythmic calm. But Evelyn knew they weren't safe. "Not yet. This power," she said, turning to Lucas and Tomas, her voice heavy with understanding. "It's not just a weapon. It's the key to everything. If we can control it, we can change the future. But we have to be careful. The ancients didn't just leave this power behind. They hid it for a reason." Lucas nodded, his face pale as he wiped the sweat from his brow. "So what now?" Evelyn stepped back from the pedestal, her mind still processing everything that had happened. She had activated the power, but now she understood its true nature. It wasn't just about control. It was about balance. "The ancients had a purpose," she said slowly. "They believed this power could transcend humanity, that it could elevate us to something greater. But something went wrong. They lost control." She turned back to the subdued creature, her gaze hardening. "We have to find out what happened and what they were really trying to do, because this power, if it's unleashed again, could destroy everything." As the final remnants of the creature's resistance faded, Evelyn knew their journey was far from over. They had awakened the power, but in doing so, they had unlocked something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. And now there was no going back. The chamber was silent, save for the soft hum of energy emanating from the pedestal. Evelyn stood at its base, her mind racing. The creature, once an unstoppable force of destruction, now lay motionless, its glowing eyes dull and lifeless, as though the very essence that had animated it had been drained. She knew, however, that this was only the beginning. Behind her, Tomas and Lucas were still catching their breath, their faces pale with shock. Tomas had stepped cautiously toward the pedestal, his eyes wide as he took in the unnatural calm that had descended upon the room. "We did it," Lucas said, his voice shaking, though there was a hint of disbelief in his words. "We controlled it. We stopped it." Evelyn didn't answer immediately. Her gaze remained locked on the pedestal, the pulsing light still beating like a heart. She could feel the power, the potential that it held. It was more than just a weapon or a tool. It was a force, an energy that had the ability to reshape reality itself. But in that power, there was a danger, an abyss that could swallow them all if they weren't careful. She knew that the ancients had hidden this power for a reason. It wasn't meant to be wielded by anyone, not even them. "We didn't stop it," Evelyn finally said, her voice steady but filled with an ominous undertone. "We've only temporarily contained it. This force, it's far too powerful for us to control. We've only scratched the surface. What do you mean? Tomas asked, taking another cautious step toward her. It's dormant. We've neutralized it. No, Evelyn replied, her eyes narrowing as she studied the pedestal. It's not dormant. It's waiting. The power we've awakened isn't just a passive energy source. It's a consciousness, a mind that has been sealed away for millennia. And now that we've activated it, it knows we're here. The words hit like a cold wind. Tomas and Lucas exchanged uncertain glances, the realization slowly dawning on them. Evelyn took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. When the ancients first created this power, they believed it would elevate humanity, but they didn't anticipate that the energy itself would develop its own will, its own purpose. They didn't foresee that it would become something more than just an instrument, that it could transcend its creators. And when they realized the danger, they had no choice but to hide it, to lock it away. But why didn't it attack us before? Lucas asked, his voice trembling. Evelyn looked at him, because it was waiting for the right moment. It needed someone to awaken it, someone to bring it back into the world. And now that we've done that, it's awake. It knows we've found it. A chill ran down her spine as she realized the magnitude of what they had unleashed. This wasn't just ancient technology. This was something far older, far more intelligent, and more dangerous than anything they had ever encountered. The rumbling began again, low and distant at first, but it was unmistakable. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the air seemed to hum with an increasing intensity. The walls of the chamber shuddered, as though the very bones of the city were groaning in pain. Evelyn could feel it now, the power of the ancient energy moving, shifting, preparing to escape its prison. The city's waking up, Tomas whispered, his voice barely audible over the rising noise. It's coming back to life. Evelyn's heart sank as she realized what that meant. The city was built upon this energy. Everything, the walls, the tunnels, the very ground they stood on, was infused with it. And now, with the pedestal activated, the energy was beginning to spread. It wasn't just contained in one room. It was spreading through the entire city, awakening the dormant forces within it. We need to leave, Evelyn said, her voice filled with urgency. Now. But as they turned to retreat, the entrance they had come through, the only escape route, slammed shut with a deafening roar. The walls of the chamber seemed to collapse in on themselves, blocking their way out. Trapped, Lucas said, his voice rising with panic. We're trapped in here. Evelyn turned back to the pedestal, desperation flooding her thoughts. If they didn't stop the power now, the entire city would awaken, and with it, the force that had been sealed away for so long. She had no doubt that this power, if allowed to spread, would reshape the world, and not in the way humanity had hoped. It would bring with it a new order, one controlled by a force far older than any civilization, far beyond the comprehension of the human race. We need to shut it down, Evelyn said, her eyes focused on the pedestal. We need to destroy it before it's too late. Tomas and Lucas exchanged looks, their faces filled with doubt. How? Tomas asked. How do we destroy something this powerful? Evelyn's gaze shifted to the creature, still lying motionless in the corner of the room. It's not about destroying it. It's about reversing the activation. We need to undo what we've done. But as she reached the pedestal, she felt the energy shift again, a pulse of resistance that made her skin prickle with fear. The power was not going to let them undo what they had started. The pedestal seemed to react to her touch, its symbols flashing brighter, as though rejecting her efforts. The rumbling grew louder, more intense, until it felt like the entire city was shaking. Dust fell from the walls, and the air crackled with static electricity. Then, from the shadows, the creature stirred. It rose slowly, its body shifting, its eyes glowing with a renewed, fiery intensity. But this time it was different. The energy had infected it, had merged with it, giving it an unnatural strength, an intelligence that was no longer bound by the primitive programming that had originally controlled it. The creature turned its gaze on Evelyn, Tomas, and Lucas. Its eyes were no longer just glowing. They were alive with intent. You awaken me, it said, its voice deep, echoing with an unnatural resonance. Now, you must face the consequences. The ground shook violently as the creature began to advance toward them, its massive form towering over them. The energy that had been contained for millennia was no longer just a force. It was a living, breathing entity, and now it was free. Evelyn's mind raced. She had known this power was dangerous, but she hadn't realized how much it had changed over the centuries. It had evolved, becoming something beyond even the ancients' understanding. There was no time to think, no time to escape. The creature was upon them now, and the only thing left was a choice between fighting and surrendering to the force they had unleashed. As the light from a pedestal blazed to life again, Evelyn knew one thing for certain. The power they had awakened was no longer just a relic of the past. It was the future, and it had no intention of being stopped.